in the vein of keeping this moving right along, we are going to move along into a big story that came out this week. I think TNet, TigerNet reported it first. That's the first place that I saw it. A lot of people picked it up. A lot of YouTubers have talked about it. Clemson fans, South Carolina fans, fans of college football in general. And that is this story. Obviously, it got discovered because of court documents. Obviously, everybody knows Clemson and the ACC are suing each other. Clemson wants out, along with a lot of other institutions in the ACC. But this is how this information became public information and got into the media. So obviously, the long and short of it is the ACC approached Clemson. Well, ESPN approached the ACC about moving the South Carolina Clemson game to Friday night, the Friday right after Thanksgiving. So a Black Friday edition of the Clemson Carolina game, and they would put it on primetime television, and they wanted to move it from Saturday time slot. So they approached South Carolina. South Carolina was okay with it. Or they approached the SEC. South Carolina was okay with it. They approached the ACC. The ACC reached out to Clemson. Clemson said, absolutely not. No way we're doing that. We're not moving the game to Friday. It's on Saturday. It's going to stay on Saturday. And that's what it is. Obviously, the ACC came out with a statement saying they were disappointed in Clemson's lack of moving the game, lack of bowing to the ACC and what they wanted to do and what's best for them and the TV time slot and what's best for ESPN. Jordan, what are your thoughts on Clemson and Graham Neff and the powers that be there at Clemson kind of looking at the ACC and, throwing up a kind of FU to them and like, no, we're not moving the game. We don't care what you say. It's scheduled for Saturday, and that's the day we're going to play it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways, a lot of angles to look at it from. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I think there was a very clear messaging that, one, this game is extremely important. And from a tradition standpoint, just not something that we were willing to move on. And I think the ACC they secured some concessions from ESPN that they talked about, but they were pretty laughable. I want to read them to you in order to persuade Clemson to agree. So I'm reading from Greenville Online right now. Those concessions included a noon Eastern time start time on November 23rd versus the Citadel, a confirmed primetime game on November 29th versus the Gamecocks, an agreement to switch the schedule 2027 Labor Day Monday conference game versus NC State to a Clemson home game, a limit of 2 8-road ACC games in 2024 played in primetime, and an agreement that South Carolina would host a future Black Friday game versus Clemson. I mean, all of that is pretty laughable, especially when you consider, the fact that, there's a really good chance, there's a decent chance that none of those concessions will be able to be made, seen through, considering,
right.
Where Clemson might be in a few years from a conference standpoint. So this was, I thought it was just kind of a put your foot down, we're not doing this. And I mean, there's a lot of other reasons, Clemson traditionally on Thanksgiving, they take Thanksgiving very seriously. Dabo has always made it a point that he wants to give his players the opportunity to spend time with their families when it's logistically possible. And, before that game, and then they come back. And so, you move that game to Friday, that all of that goes out the window. Mm-hmm. So I do think that was probably a secondary reason, but it was something that I thought was worth mentioning. And so this is before the COVID year, this was the second longest continuously played rivalry in all of college football.
Thanks South Carolina for quitting on that game.
Well, the SEC in general, but South Carolina included. Well, actually, I do want to give them credit. I don't want to. I do love slandering them, but I do think they were one of the only schools that voted against canceling non-conference games. So I will give them credit there. But at the end of the day, I do think that, this is a tradition. The tradition of this game is way too much to sacrifice for a slight, bump as far as a prime time slot. Like I don't see I didn't see the benefit even with those concessions, especially because I don't think that quite a few of those will be able to be delivered as far as their promise. Especially like the 2027 Labor Day game versus NC State. Like, is that going to be played? I doubt it. We'll see. So I do think this was a moment for Clemson, and it's funny. Clemson was the one that brought these documents up. I think a lot of people were reporting that the ACC was the one that filed these documents in the lawsuit, but it was actually Clemson. So I do think it's kind of an illustration of how the ACC has been not working in the best interests of Clemson and their other member institutions. I just they're doing whatever they can to make a quick buck instead of doing things that actually improve the value and the prestige of the conference, and that's just been something that's been happening on the football side of things for decades. So this is just another example.
Yeah, look, I'm glad Clemson, more specifically Graham Neff and the powers that be that make these type of decisions for the Clemson Tigers. I'm very happy that they decided to say no and stand up for the rivalry, stand up for the traditions of this game and how much it means not only to Clemson but to both fan bases and to the state of South Carolina and all of that stuff. And just having it on a Friday. I mean, I get it that they waved the whole prime time in your face about it, but at the end of the day, like, it's tradition, right? It's that's the day that the game gets played on. And I know previously, way back when, it was played on different days. I got that, but for what the tradition and the game has become now, it's a Saturday game, right? And I think you lose some of your luster and just some of the draw to the game when you switch it to a Friday. It seems like an afterthought of a rivalry game, right? It's rivalry Saturday. It's not rivalry Friday and Saturday, right? So it seems like you're relegated to Friday night if you accept that concession on Clemson's part. And I'm very happy that they decided not to. It's absolutely ridiculous that they were approached with that, in my opinion. And to your point, it just shows the ACC and the reason that they're in this position, right? The reason that they have multiple institutions suing them. And I know the narrative out there is Clemson and Florida State and the rest of the member institutions of the ACC entered into this grant of rights and all of this stuff willingly. And, they knew what it was at the time and they still signed it. And there is some truth and validity to that. But at the end of the day, the ACC has not held up its end of the bargain with putting its universities and institutions first and trying to get the best for them. I truly don't think they've done that in any way, shape, or form. And that's the reason that they find themselves in the position that they are. So I don't feel bad for the ACC. I'm glad Clemson told them absolutely not. And we can move on and have our rivalry weekend as previously scheduled without any sort of interruptions just because it works out better for ESPN. Don't care what it works out better for. So glad we stood on business and told the ACC and ESPN, I guess, indirectly, no, we are not moving the game. So